Greetings, it's Cuddly. The style of these videos may change over time, because I don't know exactly what it is I'm doing. But I do have at least one goal, and that goal is to read every Deadpool comic so you don't have to. Now, there's at least a few exceptions that I'm going to make. Number one, I'm probably not going to read the early X-Force comics because Deadpool wasn't in many of them. So there's a couple omnibuses that you're not going to see nearish this era, and I'll explain a little more why. However, I am going to do the Rick Remainder version of the Uncanny X-Force because Deadpool's in all of those. My second goal is to read these as chronologically as possible in the most comfortable way one can. I'm not going to jump from one series to another, and it's going to get a little difficult around 2015 when there were at least 3 different series running at the same time. There was The Mercs for Money, had 2 parts that connected to 2 parts in this series, which is Deadpool World's Greatest, which also connected to another 2 parts that were in this series, Spider-Man Deadpool. My third goal, that's not quite as important, is to make this somewhat of a buyer's guide. You'll notice that I have the second omnibus that collects the very first run of Deadpool, but I don't have the first one. Instead, what I've done is I've purchased these slim Deadpool Classic volumes, because volumes 2 through 5 contain pretty much everything that's in the first volume of that, which is out of print and very expensive. Unfortunately, there's a sneaky little thing going on with issue 1. Dun, dun, dun. Now, this is volume 1 of the Deadpool Classic collection. You could almost, if you wanted to read the Joe Kelly run, you could almost get away with not owning this. Unfortunately, it contains issue 1 of Deadpool, the Joe Kelly run. The other 9 issues in here are the older stuff from 1993, 1994, and of course, his first appearance in the New Mutants. It's the same pose as the cover. So, his first actual appearance in that volume, there's not a lot of Deadpool actually in it. He shows up maybe like more than halfway through it, but yeah, the New Mutants was when Cable was actually taking care of all the gifted children. Interestingly enough, this is also the first appearance of Domino, but it turns out she's not actually Domino, but an imposter. It was Copycat that showed up, and then later they have the real first appearance of Domino in the X-Force, which is where we find some issues involving Deadpool. So his first official run was a limited 4-issue series called The Circle Chase, and in that we see a lot more of that early 90s, it was 1993, sort of Todd McFarlane and Image Comics was all the rage, so just kind of look at all those pouches and patches and pouches, all about the pouches, and just all that insane detail. But it was an interesting run. He has a bit of a quarrel with Kane, or Weapon X, and Juggernaut is on his own trying to find Black Tom, and I think we found that Dr. Kilbrew was actually doing some testing on Black Tom, and I think by the end of the issue you find out what exactly he did to him, and he sort of mutated him, but made him stronger, but disfigured him, and it was an interesting kind of run, and it was definitely a lot more, has that dark, gritty kind of look to it. Slayback is sort of one of the main villains, or he shows up in the story, and then what's-her-face, Vanessa, is on the same hunt that I think Weasel and Deadpool are on. she ends up... Hold on, I can't remember if that's in this issue. I gotta find it. No, okay, so yeah, Slayback is back. Must be in this one. Deadpool is trying to, and Weasel are trying to figure out where this person's will went. And yeah, here it is. She's in disguise. She's still blue, and just no one seems to notice that it's her. Just good stuff. Comics from the '90s, you know, they just dealt with that. It was kind of reminds me of Clark Kent just wearing a pair of glasses, and that's all it took. But eventually, I think Deadpool and Weasel find out that the money or the will is actually in a mansion, and but by the time they find it out, yeah, she's already on her way to the mansion, but she gets kidnapped by Slayback. Dun dun dun. And then in the final part has a little more Deadpool being Deadpool, or it has, oh, look at that, all the pouches of the world. It has Deadpool being a bit more like the one we know now, but it's still, yeah, they find this statue. Kane shows up. I feel like Juggernaut shows up. Slayback shows up. There's a moment where Slayback is going to kill Deadpool, and Vanessa jumps in the way and saves him. So it was, and then in the meanwhile, Weasel gets this statue going, which is actually a giant robot, and it's determining what things in the building are a threat, and of course determines Slayback's a threat, and other people are safe. But when it comes to Deadpool, it believes he's a threat too, and Deadpool, of course, messes with the robot's mind, and it ends up deciding to terminate itself. Like, he tricks it into that, and that's kind of how that run ended. But no, it was a early primitive version of him, and we'll see even a bit more, no offense, primitive stuff when we get to the Joe Kelly run. The second collection that this contains is another 4-issue X-Men limited series, and it's kind of more of the same as far as tone goes. It's a little more dark and gritty. Deadpool doesn't really seem to have much of a place to call home necessarily in this run. There's Black Tom still being tested on by Dr. Kilbrew, and more stuff added to him. Juggernaut breaks him out. It's kind of a Juggernaut Black Tom issue, and it's kind of, a lot of this was a bit of, or at least a bit of this was the inspiration for the second Deadpool movie, or at least parts of it were. Of course, Black Tom ends up just having a very, very tiny cameo in the movie, but there's one awesome line, which is in Deadpool 2, in which Deadpool says something along the lines of, "Oh, how I've longed to see my reflection shining in your helmet as you run towards me with murderous rage in your eyes." And it was kind of a fun little cute callback to issue 2 of that very early Deadpool run. So, but it's not my favorite. It's just, I actually found the Circle Chase a bit more of an interesting storyline, but we do actually have something from this run that carries over, which is we see Deadpool's healing factor has been slowing down. It hasn't been working as well. And what normally takes him a few minutes to grow back a finger or so is now taking him hours. And that's something that eventually is going to get addressed once we get to the main series that ran from 97 to 2002. But yeah, there's some cool covers. A lot of team up with Siren. They had a bit of a fling or a history together, and he loves that Irish lass. And yeah, I don't know. I wish there were more to say about this thing, but just kind of wasn't my thing. Didn't care too much about Black Tom or what his powers were. In case you're wondering about pages that look like this, it's because when comic books are printed and released, some of the typeface is made specifically for ads that go in, and so you can't have a splash page like that. if it lines up with an ad, so they just have those pages that they fill in because that's how it was originally formatted. And you wouldn't really want to read it differently if the pages kept shifting over and over, differently than someone would have when they read it in the comic book. But it honestly, just no offense, not my thing. The Joe Kelly run of Deadpool is one of the most revered, and I might have some controversial things to say about it when we wrap it up. But the first issue, if you think you can just buy the other volumes and skip the first issue, you really can't, because so much happens in the first issue. So much is established. It has the more cartoony looking Deadpool. He's making more jokes while he's fighting, jumping on people's backs and stuff. It's showing the Hell House for the first time, and this guy who runs it. And we see Weasel. We have appearance of Blind Owl, who, unlike the movie, is way more of his hostage that he's keeping, and sometimes he throws her in the box if she's misbehaving. It's a very different relationship, but they still have the same sort of biting humor. He's fighting Sasquatch in this one. We do have, for one brief moment, and he only has one little line, this character right here, T-Ray, who ends up being an antagonist for a very long time throughout Deadpool's run in the early run. But also Deadpool was way into transforming his character. Like, that's Deadpool, that's him again, that's him again, that's him again. He used a teleporter, and he often used a device that made him appear to look like ordinary everyday citizens, although he'd usually pick really silly ones. But no, he fights Sasquatch, and he goes to this lair out in the snow, and it turns out that there's something that's going to destroy the entire world, and Deadpool chooses potentially to sacrifice himself to stop that from happening. And turns out this was all actually a test that was being done by Zoe, and I keep forgetting the other guy's name. But they were testing to see if he was some kind of hero, but they don't say what exactly they mean. But you're going to find out throughout the entire series that this is a run that goes all the way to near the end of Joe Kelly's run as writer. It's a big storyline called the Mithras Directive, and they're trying to find this person that's supposed to save the day according to this precognitive, and they think that person may be Deadpool. And that's why you don't want to miss that first issue. So this collection you can find in multiple other versions have the first 9 issues of this. So if you do have one of those collections, it's kind of a bummer because you're going to miss that first issue if you want to just collect volumes 2 through 5. Thank you for watching, and as always, stay cuddly.